Over the next 2 minutes, I want to make you think about and reflect on how you use retrieval practice in the classroom. Now, I'm not going to spend the next 2 minutes talking about what retrieval practice is, because over the last few years, it's certainly become quite common practice in schools all the way across the country, now that that kind of research and the science behind it has actually filtered down. I've done a video about the science behind it in terms of the forgetting curve that Ebbinghaus researched actually back in 1885, that talked about how on the first day of instruction we can remember pretty much everything, but by day one we're almost losing 50%, and by day 7 we're almost losing 90% of what we've been given in terms of our content. And if you think about that for students who go to different lessons, whether it's in secondary school, an hour every day, 5 different lessons, whether it's post-16, they might have 2 or 3 lessons, or whether it's just at primary where you're teaching different topics throughout the day, there's so much information that goes in there. There's no wonder why all that information drifts away. But what I want you to think about and reflect on in this is, how often are you doing retrieval practice? How are you doing it? So is it low stakes? And what are you getting them to retrieve? Is it random information that you're just thinking, I'll just pick some random things from yesterday? Or is it more nuanced than that? Is it actually the key foundational information, the stuff that they really need to know? And that if they don't know this, they're not going to be able to know this and this and this. So what are those kind of foundational pieces of knowledge that you have been teaching yesterday or in last topic that you can use in as part of your retrieval practice? Great way to do this is if you want to do kind of like I've talked before about quizzes rather than tests, but have a quiz that has almost like a Super 6. That I've seen it before, where it's 2 questions from last lesson, 2 questions from the last week or the last topic, and 2 questions from the last term. So you're starting to increase the spacing, and I've done a video on spacing before about how we need to increase the spacing so that we can kind of get them to that fetch and carry. But that's a great way of doing that, rather than just everything from yesterday, because retrieving things from yesterday is fairly easy. It's still in our short-term memory, but it gets more difficult when you introduce the spacing. So as part of your retrieval, can you then start to think about last lesson, last week, last topic, etc., and let the students know why we're doing this? The first 2 questions are going to be a little bit easier because it's from yesterday. The next 2 are going to be a bit more difficult. The last 2 are going to be really challenging. Let them in on that and let them know that we are doing this because this is how retrieval practice works, and that it is going to be challenging, but we know they can do it.